We should maybe start Audacity.
Well, hang on a minute. I want to make
Should
sure.
I post it on Facebook too?
Sure, why not?
On the mintCast.
I think we got a grand total of 2 people on that.
Oh, there's more than that.
Okay. Good.
There's
That
182 followers.
Ooh.
Well, don't forget the Reddit, Joe. Boy, my tongue is not.
Yeah, that
Do we have a Reddit?
We do, and I've been efforting trying to revitalize that. I say efforting. I've been on there twice.
A quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Oh, these teeth just are still catching in the back. I just can't get enough sanded off.
I'm not a big Reddit guy, and how do you get to mintCast? Create post.
I'm going there.
On Reddit?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. You go, boy.
Oh,
I'm searching for mintCast anyway.
I'm on it.
Searching.
Well, if you're there, then go ahead and post. r/Linux Mint, r/Linux Podcasts,
mintCast.
r/mintcast. Mintcast. No, I don't see an r/mintcast. Ah, there we go. r/mintcast.
Down mode. Nah.
And I will join. I am joined.
At the hip.
Well, it's not exactly laying that link out the way everything else does, but whatever.
Okay.
I see the post for 403, but nothing else.
I just did it. Episode 404.
Well, again, we should just not do the show and tell everyone that they just lost it.
What are you talking about? We were there. Yeah. Did you try turning it off and turning it back on again?
You've been watching the IT crowd, I see.
It is my guilty freaking pleasure because it's so bad. It is awful, but yet I enjoy it.
It really, kind of sums up IT.
Yeah.
All the horrible parts of IT, it's all there.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it.
I haven't seen Richmond for a couple of episodes.
I think I'm only on like episode 5, but
we're in season 2. I think episode 5 or 6.
All right, let's get the show notes up, and I am not going to do it in the browser because you're just asking for it.
Don't open the red door, Bill.
Do you have names next to the articles so we know?
Yes. Yes, which means you picked up some by default, Bill. All the ones Moss and I didn't want to read, those are yours.
I'm telling you right now, if it's got names in it that are hard to pronounce, that's going to be all Moss. So just keep the microphone on.
I didn't see any hard to pronounce names.
Yeah, well, you
other than Rudrasarasvat, and I can say that all day long. Yeah.
If I hear somebody saying their name, then I'll remember it at that point. But
sometimes I feel
you're
like
also being literal with the word name, Moss. And sometimes words are difficult.
Oh, words are difficult.
Big words and them little bitty.
Well, the only problem I have with words is my teeth get in the way.
Take them out.
I take them out, then my teeth don't get in the way.
There you go.
They don't get in the way enough.
You're welcome.
I can't do my S's and T's without my teeth. With my teeth, I have the problem with CH's and G's.
How's them modified teeth working for you?
Well, if I could carve out another batch on the back, they'd be working great. But they are the only thing that I got working. I've been whittling on them and they just don't go away. It's like they grow back or something. Let's get Audacity going, guys.
What's Audacity?
It's one of them
It's that thing
daggum
we
old
use to
computer
record
things.
the show, Joe.
Daggum
Oh,
old
you mean a
computers.
computer?
Yeah, you know them clickety click 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 click.
A microphone? Oh, you can't put it in the wrong order, Moss. It's got to be Guess Who's Back, Back Again, Shady's Back.
I
You can't
didn't put it in
Now
any
I get
order.
it.
You can't put it in the wrong order, Moss.
I put it in the order it was there. Except since I'm leading, I go first.
But now it's
You-
wrong.
It's
had
not
to know.
wrong.
It is
I'm back
wrong.
again.
Guess Who's Back, Back Again,
It's a song,
Shady's
Moss.
Back.
I'm not going to be Guess Who's Back. I don't know what you're talking about, Joe. I really
It's a
don't understand.
song.
Well, I don't know that song.
Why don't you know that song? Jesus, it's been
Because
around
I'm
for like
old.
20 years, and it was insanely popular. And every time you turn around, it was. I didn't even like the music, and I still know it. Bill didn't like the music. He still knows it.
Well, if you don't like it, the order it's in, then do something else.
In other words, change it back.
No, because I go first, and I'm not going to be Guess.
No, you're not guess. It's a song lyric. Guess you know what? I'm gonna make you watch it.
Do it.
You know what? I'm not going to watch it anyhow.
Slim Shady.
I certainly don't want anything to do with Slim Shady.
Oh, YouTube. Yeah, here we go. Oh God, 3 minutes of ads first. I don't know. Somebody else fix it, I guess. Put it the way you want it then. Or else, I'll tell you what, Moss, either you fix it, put it back the way it was, or we're going to sing it right after you. I'm going to sing it when it comes my turn to say.
There. Now you got to find another song.
Let's see here. Did you actually fix it? I'm not.
No, he changed it.
I'm not in real time. I'm Moss. The host is Buzzkill. Shady's back, Bill. Nope, that's not going to work, brother.
I didn't fix that. I fixed me. You all got to pick another song.
I don't understand what the problem is if you're going first anyway.
Joe, this is not letting us fix it.
Baby Back Bill.
I want my baby back, baby back, baby. That song I know.
I've never tried their ribs.
Here is baby back ribs.
All right. Well, I got Audacity up. I'm ready to go if you guys want to.
Well, we still got to fix that header because it ain't right.
Well, then fix it.
I fixed me. You guys got to fix you.
I fixed me.
You're just going to call me a buzzkill. I can quit
That's
the
right.
show, Joe.
That's right.
You want me to host or quit?
You ain't going to quit. And you can't hide from us.
Anyhow, Shady's back means nothing, Bill. Find something else.
I don't have that up anymore.
Oh.
I took that out. I'm not using the
Well, it
browser
still says
version.
Shady's back on my script and Joe's.
Yeah.
All right. Just have Bill.
The problem is I don't like using that because it's got a habit of resetting and scrolling to the top right in the middle reading, especially when somebody is editing.
Joe.
Don't say anything.
All right, let me see what you guys are, all the nonsense you guys are.
Quick, let's do Audacity.
My Moss, remember me? Billiam. Oh, gee, never heard that one before.
Mm-mm.
You know what? You're used to all the Bill jokes. You've
Yep.
had an entire lifetime of them. Me,
you betcha.
I haven't. I get to say all the Bill jokes because
You get all the
Don't
Joe
forget-
jokes.
Don't forget the, hey, Mr. Bill, what do you know?
I
Don't
did
forget-
that one already. Oh, no.
Yep. All right, I got Audacity.
Well, we wonder where Joe's going with that gun in his hand.
It's Texas. It could be anywhere.
yeah,
True.
Groceries,
Dollar General.
Yeah, Dollar General, the gas station,
Taco Bell.
daycare, Taco Bell.
All right,
Who knows?
Audacity. Here we go. Everybody,
Yep.
3, 2, 1, record. That's good enough for Tony, and we're not using Tony these days. 0 time. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Zero.
Yikes.
Yikes, indeed.
Good enough for government work.
Good thing I don't work for the government. And now the cars go by. Yeah. Vroom.
Couldn't do that while we were doing our thing.
Couple
you could
small
still-
ones went by, but not a big one like that. Or a truck. Wait till the truck comes by.
I call those guys concrete cowboys, especially the ones that do it.
You mean the guys that, drive the dualies and, they drive to work and back and that's it. And they work at a desk.
And they paid $116,000 for that truck.
Yeah.
I was talking about the semis that use it to shift their gears. We got this thing called a Jake brake.
Mm-hmm.
That
Well, I've got a state highway right behind my trailer, and it's got a curve leading up to a stop sign.
Yep, you hear them all the time. Then
Yep. All right, let's get this show on the road, guys.
let's do it.
Reminds me of Kevin in a big rig.
Oh, I never did complete my thoughts.
Show
on that. Yeah.
road.
Huh? Oh, yeah.
Welcome to mintCast, the podcast by the Linux Mint community for all users of Linux. This is episode 404. This is episode 404.5, recorded on Sunday, the 22nd of January, 2023. I'm Moss. Remember me?
The host is a buzzkill. I'm Joe.
Hey, everybody, I'm Bill.
First up in the news, Raspberry Pi adds an autofocus camera. Fairphone 2 hits end of life. More tenacity than ever. New Unity Ubuntu Minimal arrives soon. Braves add bridges. Kodi 20 is released. LiveVert 9.0 is out. Google gets shot down. And new features arrive in Firefox 109. In security and privacy, nothing to see here. Move along. Then in our wanderings, Moss is back. Joe has fun with a pie hole, and Bill takes some OTC stuff. In our innards section, we cover what we think are the best distros and a few up-and-comers. And finally, the feedback and a couple of suggestions. In the news.
First
Joe?
up, new autofocus camera modules for Raspberry Pi. This is from raspberrypi.com. Announced January 9th, the launch of the Raspberry Pi Camera Module 3, 4 different variants of Camera Module 3, starting at the familiar price of $25. They've produced camera modules with both visible light and infrared sensitive options, and with either a standard or wide field of view. and in place of the fixed focus optics of its predecessors. Camera Module 3 provides powered autofocus, allowing you to take crisp images of objects from around 5 centimeters out to infinity. There's a video demo on the page, and the link is in the notes. Which seems cool. I mean, I always like a good camera module for the Raspberry Pi. It's a good idea. I like that it's improved. Maybe one of these days I'll actually pick one up and test it out. What do you guys think?
It's the one thing I don't have is a camera for any of my Pis.
All right. Fairphone 2 hits end of life after 7 years of updates. This is from Ars Technica. It can be done. Android manufacturers can actually support a phone for a sizable amount of time. Fairphone has announced the end of life for the Fairphone 2, which will be March 2023. That phone was released in October 2015, so that's almost 7.5 years of updates. Fairphone is a very small Dutch company with nowhere near as many resources as Google, Samsung, BBK, and the other big tech juggernauts, yet it managed to outlast them with its support program. The whole goal of the company is sustainability with easily repairable phones, available spare parts, and long update promises. The current Fairphone 4 has a 5-year hardware warranty and 6 years of updates, and the company's reputation says it can provide that. Sadly, the phones only ship in the UK and Europe. The Fairphone 2 only promised 3 to 5 years of updates, and it blew that out of the water. Updating the Fairphone 2 has been a huge undertaking for Fairphone. Updating Fairphone 2 has been a huge undertaking for Fairphone since it has mostly been doing it without Qualcomm's help. Usually, the Android update process has a chain of custody where Google updates the Android source code, your chip vendor takes that code and adds drivers and other binary blobs to it, and then the phone manufacturer takes the chip vendor code and makes it work on a particular device. For Qualcomm, a short supply cycle means it sells more chips, so it bowed out of the process pretty quickly, greatly complicating updates for Fairphone. The Fairphone 2 features the Qualcomm Snapdragon 801 SoC, a chip that Qualcomm ended support for with Android 6.0. In what is probably an Android ecosystem first, that lack of chipset support didn't stop Fairphone, which teamed up with Lineage OS and today ships Android 10 on the 7-year-old device. That's not the newest OS in the world, but it passes all of Google's Android compatibility tests. I'm sure there are newer amateur releases in the Android ROM community, but Fairphone's Android 10 build is up to the standard of an official release, as opposed to the tell me what doesn't work standard of many amateur ROM releases. Fairphone doesn't say why support is ending in March, but if it's staying on Android 10, it was going to have to kill support sometime this year. Google only supports security patches for the last 4 versions of Android, so even Google will be shutting down Android 10 support soon. If you want to keep rolling with the Fairphone 2, Fairphone says you do so at your own risk since it will soon be insecure. Fairphone says it still has a limited inventory of parts available in its web store, and if you send in your retired phone before the end of March, it will give you a €50 credit toward a new phone.
It's always nice to see a company that, actually sticks to that 5 to 6 year promise of updates and actually doing it and longer.
It's not like the phones wear out. I'm still quite happy with my Google Pixel 3a XL.
Well, I got a couple of S3s that are floating around that the only reason that they don't get used is because you can't update them enough to make them actually usable.
It's always been an irritating thing that I don't know.
Planned obsolescence?
Yeah, I have trouble getting excited about mobile devices and tablets for that very reason that they make so many things hard on purpose, and then you've got this device that's complete. I've got a tablet upstairs right now that came with Android 4. It's a Samsung, a small like 7-inch tablet. I'm gonna try to see if I can get Lineage on it or something like that, but you can't even.
I'm pretty sure those Samsungs brick easily.
I know.
Yeah, I got a couple of the Tab 3s, and even with custom ROMs on them, it's hard to get. The screen still looks beautiful, but it's really difficult to get them updated enough to keep them useful.
The wife just wants to use it to read books on. I mean, it doesn't even have access to the Play Store right now as it is. and that actually kind of surprised me. So I think it's got Android 4.4 or something like that, which I mean, I wouldn't want to go shopping on it, but
Well, Amazon sort of forced everyone to buy new Fire tablets by saying you can't buy anything in the store anymore unless you have this version of the tablet or higher.
it's it's irresponsible business behavior, in my opinion, to force people, because not everybody's got the money. If they've got this device that still works, they might not. Not everybody can just run down to the store and lay
Well,
down.
then you're not
another-
their customer anymore.
Yeah, I
If you
suppose.
don't have the money, then
Well,
they don't
it's
need
not
you.
like we have good tech recycling.
That's the other
That's
thing
true
too.
We're
Because
just throwing it out and adding in a landfill.
a
Right?
lot of the places around here, if you want to recycle anything, of any e-waste variety, you have to pay them. So what we usually ends up happening is, if the people are responsible with it at all, they'll lay it out in front of the gate after hours, and then that way it still gets recycled, but they don't have to pay for it. In fact, almost all of them are doing that. So do better, folks.
Well, you got all that e-waste that can't be used anymore, despite the fact that it works just fine.
Yeah.
And it goes, where does it go? It doesn't actually get recycled. It either goes to a landfill or it goes to, the bottom of the ocean.
Yep. That's
Well, the
majority of
weird thing
time.
is we're talking Android, which is a variant of Linux, and most of the people that are using Linux, or at least a significant number of people using Linux, are doing so to keep their old hardware going.
Yeah.
That's why I've always had trouble getting excited about this, because I suppose it fits into the Linux conversation in that they are utilizing a part of the Linux kernel or some open source tools, but it's a good example in my opinion. It's an example of companies leveraging free software in order to create a marketable
Profit for themselves.
profit for themselves. It had nothing to do with them wanting to be part of the open source ecosystem, or any values in terms of contributing back to some project. In most cases, if they're contributing back, it's just further the effort of the whatever project they're relying on. So again, I just have a lot of trouble getting wound up about them.
Okay, let's move on for now. We can always come back. That's always an interesting topic.
Yeah. Oh yeah. We'll never stop.
Well, maybe we'll do an episode on different things you can do with old phones. I'd love to do that.
I'll be bringing up. I'll probably talk at some point, if I do actually put the effort in, which I'm sure I will, putting Lineage on that tablet, or if Lineage is not available.
Well, we don't have a topic for next episode. Let's do that for next episode.
Yeah.
We'll discuss what to do with old phones.
Which probably have
It's
to
a
use
common topic
Windows.
that there's so many articles on, but I'd like to talk about it again.
Yeah.
All right. Two Audacity forks merge into Tenacity. This is from Londoner. He put it in here, and it's from Fostodon. This is what happened. First, it was revealed that Saucedacity, yet another Audacity fork with the same purpose, was still being worked on. Someone from our community discovered it, talks ensued, and then we started merging together. Now, that's evidently a quote. The code repository has been moved from GitHub to Codeberg. The latest version 1.2.1 is called Saucedacity, but the version 1.3 will revert to the Tenacity name. The feature freeze for 1.3 was announced today, January 11th. This is from fostodon.org at Tenacity. It merged with Tenacity are Saucedacity and Audacium. Do we want to test out?
Well, I've been waiting
Tenacity?
for a deb to come out because you know me, I don't compile.
Okay, somebody's got everything highlighted. Wrong button pressing. Everything
I
goes
did not
away,
do
Moss.
that.
Oh, my
It
bad.
said Joe when it happened.
Well, I
It
was
wasn't
copying. I'm copying, pasting it onto the website so that we can share
Okay.
it with folks. But I didn't know that would show up that way with you
Well,
guys.
like I said, I'm waiting for the dev. I'm not a compiler type, but I'd be happy to use Tenacity when it's ready to use.
There's no flat pack then, I assume.
At this point, there's Codeberg.
Yeah, there's a GitHub. Yeah. Well, I'd be interested in trying it out if it makes it to a flat pack.
I suppose I could try. I mean, I've ran Audacity from source to see if it fixed a couple of problems, which it didn't. Um, and it didn't take very long to compile. So I might try it at some point. I've been moderately interested in some of these forks, but I mean, I rely on Audacity to do a couple of very specific things that I don't know could be improved upon. Unless they improve the horizontal scroll bar disappearing, that would be great. But
Well, we got a lot of news. Let's move it.
all right.
Unity 7.7 available for testing from unityd.org. This is written by Rudra Saraswat. Greetings, Unity lovers. As you're likely aware, we recently succeeded in running Unity 7.7 without Compez. Based on this effort, we've created a new variant of Unity 7, presenting Unity X, superseding the previous effort with the same name, a new variant of Unity that retains all the features of Unity 7, yet offers even more customization options like using a window manager of your choice with Wayland support coming soon, replacing or even removing the panel, etc. It doesn't even require any of Ubuntu's GTK patches. The look and feel of Unity X is akin to Unity 7, but with added flexibility. You can install it from, and there's a GitLab link, until it's in the arch/gentoo/manjaro/Ubuntu repos. Both Unity 7 and Unity X will be shipping in the upcoming Ubuntu Unity and Manjaro Unity releases. We can't wait for you to try it out. Here are the features. Dash and Launcher. The Dash is not just visually identical to that of Unity 7.7, but also shares the same underlying code, resulting in a stable and reliable experience. You now have the added flexibility of adjusting the opacity of both the Dash and the launcher through UnityX's configuration file. Additionally, the launcher/dock has been borrowed from Unity 7, and it has been seamlessly integrated and works perfectly fine. The HUD. We have an all-new HUD based on Plotinus, and you can see it in action in this screenshot, well, in some screenshot, and it opens with Control-Shift-P. It supports a lot more apps than Unity 7's HUD, and unlike Unity 7's HUD, can be opened simultaneously in multiple apps. Unity X Control Center, the system settings app, is a fork of that of Unity 7, but supports changing most of Unity X's config. For the true tech aficionados among us, a configuration protocol has been devised as expounded upon in the subsection below, specifically tailored to the requirements of elite power users with an in-depth understanding of the intricacies of the system. I would say Rudra Saraswat goes on amazing the community with each year of his life. What is he, 13 now? I actually know his birthday. I think he's still 13.
This is still, to this day, the best desktop for high DPI and multiple like monitor configurations. Now I realize you can get multi-monitor working on a lot of desktops, but let's say you've got one that's turned sideways. What's the word for that? It's sitting vertical, and then you got two that are not, and you got them sitting
Portrait,
all
landscape.
portrait. Yeah, Unity is still the one that handles that elegantly, and I still think some people have said that it looks dated. I've heard people say I still think that it is a modern looking
So do you.
desktop.
So do you.
Yeah. But I think it's modern and it's worth more love than it gets. I wish it was easier to install. I want to try it on Arch, and apparently there's a unofficial repository you can install and then install a meta package, but there's no information in the Arch Wiki anymore.
Looking at the screenshots, yeah, it does look fairly modern while still having, a lot of the stuff you would expect.
Yeah.
In all the places you would expect.
Yep. I still
I
like
think
it.
it's amazing he managed to pull compiz out of it and actually make it work better.
It's interesting. They put compies in the XFCE version of Mint to this day. And I'm not real sure what the thinking is on that, but there you go. I assume since there's no name next to this next one that you want me to read it. Ubuntu 2304 will offer minimal version, which is under 700 megabytes. And this is from OMG Ubuntu. Ubuntu, one of the more minimally minded spins, has revealed its planning to release a new Ubuntu minimal image starting with Ubuntu 2304. It's an expansion of the Ubuntu core effort started back in 2015, but with a big old rubber stamp of officialdom on it. Officialdom? In a post to the Ubuntu developer mailing list, Steve Langasek says Ubuntu Minimal parallels existing minimal install targets from the Ubuntu desktop and Ubuntu server images to provide a smaller install footprint without applications that the developers want installed as part of the default experience, but which are not essential. Ubuntu Minimal will be made available as a separate download. It will still use the Ubiquity installer and won't require an active internet connection to complete installation. It will differ from the Ubuntu Minimal option in the existing image by not installing everything and then removing what's not needed for the minimal image. Now, this is interesting because it means that now you'll be able to fit the ISO on a CD-ROM.
Nobody uses CDs anymore.
No, but I can see
the people who use CDs are going to want this.
Yeah, I can see this being useful in developing markets, maybe where you just need something. You need to like if you were going to go to the.
It's always nice to have something with a minimal footprint.
Yeah.
Especially if you're using older hardware.
And I think it's great that they're only going to install what's part of the minimal installation. I've complained so many times that to install a minimal distro, you have to install everything and then watch it remove the stuff that's not included in the minimal.
Seems counterintuitive.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't need everything installed because you're planning on configuring it just the way that you want. And sometimes it's best to start with a minimal install.
It's almost always the case with me. But yeah, Ubuntu is a good choice for people who, I've installed some variant of that on several people's computers that complained that they learned how to use things on a very basic level when XP was a thing. And then the new versions came along and just confused them. And
XFCE, Mint... XFCE, Cinnamon, and Mate are all really good for that type of person.
I
would think that Mate would be closer to XP than XFCE would.
Well, it's just that XP, Mate it's fine, it's good. It's just a lot more aggressively maintained or aggressively developed.
Updated?
Yeah, than XFCE is. You can put that on somebody's machine that you know will react poorly to changes. And you can count on that pretty much working the same way 5 years from now as it did the day you set it up, So, I mean, I would be interested to know, and I know there's no way to do this, but what is, like, Ubuntu compared to Ubuntu Mate? What's the difference in how popular they are?
Well, I only have really old information, back when Martin Wimpress was still with Ubuntu, but at that time Ubuntu Mate was the number 2 downloaded distribution of Ubuntu.
And that I suppose that makes sense in Ubuntu's case because the Mate version, of course, had a lot more people talking about it. You had a lot more eyeballs on it.
Yeah, well, do you want GNOME 3 or GNOME 2? Go Mate.
Well, I mean, you had GTK. You got GTK 3 in XFCE. It just, I don't know. I think you had a lot more people talking about it because it was Martin Wimpress was involved in that. But you also, there was a lot of reasons why that was so popular. He literally
Martin
made an image.
Literally busted his butt making that thing work.
And it was awesome while he was doing it. I haven't really used it much since then.
Well, he is still on the Mate project. He still runs the Mate project, I believe.
But no, since we were talking about it when he first, well, it wasn't when he first switched over, but a little while after, we had all done a review on the show, and I haven't used it since then, I don't think.
I've tried it several times just to see. The one unique thing about Mate is the Ubuntu Mate. It comes with several different layouts, or it's set up to give you several different choices as far as the layout paradigm, where you can make it look like the old GNOME 2. You can make it look like the new style with the brisk menu and all that stuff. And then you had this one called Mutiny, which applied a couple of different elements to make it look and behave exactly like Unity. And it was the closest, it got closer to actual Unity even than KDE Plasma could in terms of the way it looked and the way it behaved, while using far less resources to do it, So that was interesting. At one point, they was trying to get rid of that because of the different things that it required you to install to get it working, but then they brought it back because a lot of more people than they were initially aware were actually using it and responded poorly when they took it out.
Well, I know I have stopped using Mate on Mint, and I know I reported on why I did that, but I'm not remembering it right now. I am using Cinnamon on all my Mint installs now.
I think it was because you wanted to test out Cinnamon.
No, I was actually having a problem that seemed to be related to it being Mate, that apparently they updated something and it didn't work right. And I've never said that about Mate in the past, but it started not working and I needed something that worked.
And you're going to get that in a desktop that is so, like I said, is so aggressively developed. Well, the development is all going on the Ubuntu Mate side, So whether or not things work on every other distribution, that's maybe not at first.
All right.
Take it, Joe.
Brave browser adds support for Tor bridges. This is from Brave.com. The Brave browser has had support for private browsing with Tor since 2018, as a way to give our users a way to protect their network privacy. One request we have recently started to receive with increased frequency is support for Tor bridges. Bridges are a way for users to access the Tor network even when their government is blocking connections to the network. Starting with Brave 1.44, users in affected countries have had an easy way to circumvent these restrictions from the settings page. Once the desired bridge configuration is selected, new private windows with Tor will only attempt to connect to the Tor network via the specified bridge. More details can be found in the official documentation. In addition to enabling users to connect to bridges and relays graciously offered by volunteers in the Tor community, Brave will continue to contribute to increasing network capacity. Besides operating the relays we have been running since we launched private windows with Tor, we are now making it easy for our users to share their internet connections with users in censored countries. Starting in version 1.47, Brave will enable users to install and turn on the Snowflake extension in a single click. We, Brave, are proud to be a member of the Tor project and are happy to be able to provide ways for our users to access the information they are looking for. Many of our websites, including Brave Search, are available natively on the Tor network via Onion addresses. Note that if your personal safety depends on remaining anonymous, you should use the Tor browser instead. And yeah, Tor's awesome. It may be a little bit slow. You might have better luck with a VPN, but I understand that a lot of your commercial VPNs can also be tracked in certain countries. Not necessarily tracked, but blocked because the IP addresses are known.
Yeah, this is mostly for those certain countries because some people just can't get access to information.
Right. You can't get access to a VPN because they're blocked. So use Tor.
They're two completely different use cases, really.
No.
Honestly,
From
if you're
VPNs versus Tor network?
yeah, because you're with Tor, you're doing more than encrypting the traffic. You're bouncing off of random servers, so there's no, you couldn't just find out what somebody, if you was going to go and do what they, or see what they were up to. Of course, this is a wild oversimplification, but you couldn't just go and track down whatever server that VPN service he was using was bouncing its traffic off of. With Tor, I mean, everything is anonymized right down to the IP addresses of the nodes, you know.
You're right. And then again, you're also slightly incorrect there because it is possible for a Tor node to be owned. So if one of those Tor nodes that you're on and it gets bounced around, I understand that. But if one of those Tor nodes that it gets bounced around to is owned, then all the traffic going through it is monitored.
At that
So
point, it's VPN maybe on top of Tor. I don't know.
Yeah, a VPN and Tor would
Yeah.
probably be your best bet. But then again, that provides you two endpoints where it's potential for, the data to be owned. One at the VPN, one on all those Tor nodes.
Yep. Watch what you do, folks.
Moving along. Kodi 20 released with AV1 and Pipewire support. This is from 9 to 5 Linux. The Kodi 20 Nexus has been released today, January 15th, as the latest stable update of this free open source and cross-platform home theater software for GNU/Linux, Android, Raspberry Pi, iOS, tvOS, macOS, and Windows platforms. Kodi 20 Nexus is a massive update that comes nearly 2 years after Kodi 19 Matrix to introduce major and exciting new features like support for the Pipewire media server, AV1 hardware decoding on Linux via VA API, Video Acceleration API, AV1 codec support for input stream, as well as built-in Steam Deck controller support. Also new is initial support for the NFS version 4, Network File System Protocol, WS Discovery, SMB Discovery for Unix platforms, Linux, Android, and Apple, AV1 hardware decoding on Android, independent volume settings for GUI sounds, new color picker window dialog, new media flags for HDR videos, and the ability to add video HDR type information to a video list item. I don't have to know what that means. I just have to read it. On top of that, Kodi 20 brings support for mounting optical media by default on Linux, native support for Apple M1, including native windowing and input handling, ACES/Hable tone mapping support, and more bicubic shaders for GLES on Linux, as well as support for read-only recordings. Also for Linux users, there's the ability to set HDR output when using the generic buffer management API, which provides a mechanism for allocating buffers for graphics rendering tied to the Mesa graphics stack. Of course, there are also numerous improvements like support for specifying providers for PVR channels and recordings, better support for multi-PVR add-on scenarios, better Siri remote handling on iOS and tvOS, as well as better subtitle support for the ASS/SSA, TX3G, SAMI, and WebVTT formats. More details at the link.
Kodi, I've been using Kodi since it was XBMC, and I've always been a fan. I found it obtuse, to set up, and there, it had its limitations, and I've since left it behind in favor of Jellyfin.
Now, I've used it off and on, and you can definitely see that a lot of other things were heavily influenced by XBMC.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've also kind of left it behind because I'm not dedicating an entire system to just
No.
media.
However, one thing I am going to try is apparently there is a Jellyfin plugin for Kodi, which would be useful because Jellyfin's great and all, but as far as like getting a Raspberry Pi and using that as a set-top box, there's no
Yeah.
there's no client to make that work
Well,
correctly. And
I know Moss uses Kodi on a Pi, but
Moss
I
does not use Kodi. Moss lost Kodi access when he lost access to the plugins.
Okay.
but it would be interesting to try and see, and I think that's going to be my next Pi project, is to put Libre Elec on a Pi and then set up Kodi, and instead of doing all the work to add all the Samba shares, which I don't use anymore, put the
Fuse mounts.
well, no, because there's a
Jellyfin?
straight Jellyfin add-on now, and then see if that is a good, reliable method for just getting a set-top box and then adding what I need to it. Because the biggest thing about Kodi was that you had to do all the metadata scraping client side, so it mattered how powerful of a device was running Kodi. And I've got all these Fire Sticks and Fire TVs in the house, and in order to get Kodi on those, it had to be side loaded, which was just an ordeal every single time they came up with an update. Jellyfin is available from their app store, and all of the metadata scraping and even the transcoding is done server side. So the only thing the client has to do is render the video. But again, it would be interesting to see how well Kodi handles that through their plugin system.
I used to have it installed on my Android phone, and I used it on occasion, but I didn't use it enough to like leave it installed, I guess, because I just checked and it's not there anymore.
I mean, it always was. One thing that I thought was cool about it is you could have like XFCE for some people. They struggle with the screen tearing and that, watching videos. You put Kodi on this thing, and it just plays the videos beautifully every single time. So, I mean, as an option, if you're the kind of person that's just got a lot of locally saved media on a machine and you want a good integrated way to play it, it's great for that. It almost instantly got better than Windows Media Center. Yes, that used to be a thing.
Bill, I think you're up on this next one.
Okay, yeah.
It's a short one.
I can see why. LibVirt 9.0 released from Phoronix. LibVirt 9.0 was released on Monday, that's January 16th, as the newest version of this Linux virtualization API. This virtualization API, backed by Red Hat, continues to support a wide range of hypervisors, and with the version 9.0 release has added additional functionality. LibVirt 9.0 adds support for external snapshots deletion with QEMU using the existing API. LibVirt 9.0 with QEMU now supports PASST as plug a simple socket transport for connecting an emulated network device to the host's network. QEMU external backend support for SWTPM as a software trusted platform module support for passing file descriptors rather than passing files for the QEMU disk, and other additions. LibVirt 9.0 also now prefers PNGs over PPM images for domain screenshots with QEMU support for setting multiple nodes for the preferred NUMA policy when running on recent versions of the Linux kernel and libnuma and various bug fixes. So to explain what some of this means, it's always okay. I'll start from towards the back. The new TPM support, the SWTPM support, that's a module you had to enable in order to install Windows 11 on it, so that it had some sort of emulated pathway to the TPM module that's on your machine. So if you've got a machine that's capable of running Windows 11, then you can run it in a KVM through libvirt, and it works relatively well. I've got it running on 2 machines. There's a few jumping through hoops you have to do, but for somebody that needs Windows for the odd occasional task, it works relatively well for that. The external snapshot deletion is also useful for people that want to like stop a machine right in the middle of what it's doing without shutting it down, and then be able to go right back to that place, just like a game emulator, basically, where you can stop it right where it's at and then go to where it is, and it works really, really well. Red Hat with libvirt has really created a virtualization API that gets a virtual machine about as close to the bare metal as you could possibly get, which is kind of cool, I think, because it's good for all of the stuff you need to do on Windows, and then it's also good for trying out new Linux distributions as well.
Am I the only one that pronounces lib as lib, since it is a library?
That is correct. You are the only one. Everyone else.
Well,
says
no
lib.
one else has corrected me, and I've been doing it on Full Circle Weekly News for as long
You're
as.
still the only one.
There's no need to correct people in this ecosystem. It's all about
Look. Everybody respects you, Moss, because you're. What's the word I'm looking for?
Old.
I don't want to say the word you're looking for.
Well, it's still a library, and if they can spend hours arguing over whether it's GIF or GIF.
No, we do that. I've heard the developers come on.
No. The only real argument we have, because GIF or GIF, I believe the developer for that came out and said that it was GIF, but
it's not a Giraffics library. It's
yeah. But the only real one is Daemon versus Demon.
Yeah.
Well, that's just Leo.
Leo being wrong.
There's other shows that really, really enjoy this sort of culture we have of mispronouncing things, because for a very long time these words were only really written down and never spoken in public, and
well, it's like mate versus mate. There's a lot of people that still say mate because that's the word
they're wrong.
Know. Well, yeah, they're wrong. I understand that, but
the point is, I mean, a lot of this is born out of not create, because if you make it one definite thing and then somebody's got a project out there that they've copyrighted somehow that nobody ever knew about, then if you call it one thing and it's specifically this, and we've decided that that's what it is, then you can get sued for copyright infringements. That's where a lot of this is almost certainly born out of, is that, and that's also why we have some of these unreadable, unspeakable names for software projects that just don't seem to make any sense the way they're spelled, and it's all just in an effort to never get sued, and that is what it is. And then of course we've made this culture of fun ways of saying things, and I've heard developers of these projects, they'll go on a podcast that I won't name, and they say it right until they hear one of the announcers on that podcast say it wrong, and then they start saying it wrong. Like it's a disease that is
they
easily.
just
we do
they
have
match
one
the people
particular
that they're working with.
Yeah.
We do have one particular person over at Jupiter who refuses to say things right no matter what.
Okay, I wasn't going to go there, but he does enjoy. I mean, partly I imagine it got started just because some people have a little trouble saying certain words, you know. But then it became this thing where we start arguing about simple things like gifts, and gifts should be obvious, but the fact that it's not, and these are not unintelligent people that are making these mistakes, you know. These are intelligent, you know, thoughtful people, and the fact that it does get mispronounced is a I think it's a bit entertaining. But some people get downright ignorant over that kind of thing.
That always makes me smile.
Yeah.
Just,
Well-
you know, it gives me fuel.
Joe, why don't you go beat up Google for us?
Okay, Google Topics API for targeted ads gets shot down again. Google's plan to reinvent ad targeting for the postponed post-cookie era has again been complicated by privacy concerns. After the Chocolate Factory's Federated Learning of Cohorts, FLOC, proposal for delivering interest-based ads in a privacy-preserving way turned out to have less privacy than the package's ingredient list suggested. The ad biz reworked the technology and rebranded it Topics. The Topics API, one of a number of ostensibly privacy protecting technologies being developed under the Privacy Sandbox brand, has been sold as a way for web browsers to watch what people do online in a non-creepy way. It's intended as a mechanism to determine and report people's interests, such as hiking or fitness, to pick two innocuous examples, without revealing people's identities to website operators and advertisers. Third-party cookies, beloved by advertisers as a way to track people online, are on their way out because they are a privacy disaster. Originally, this was supposed to have happened by the end of 2022. But cookies, identifiers servers deposit in client browsers, keep getting reprieves in the absence of any viable replacement. And the process has become slower still due to the intervention of regulators, roused by complaints from Google's ad industry rivals that Privacy Sandbox tech might actually enable privacy and leave ad firms starved of precious data. In the year since January 2022, when Topics displaced Flock, various technical types have been kicking the tires of Topics and probing Google's claims about the technology. Last week, the Technical Architecture Group of the World Wide Web Consortium, the web's technical body, weighed in with its assessment of the Topics API. The group's findings are not good news for Google. In a post to the Topics Code repository, tag member from Digital Bazaar, Amy Guy, said the Topics API, intended to facilitate the sharing of interest data with third parties while preserving privacy, does not achieve its goals. The Topics API, as proposed, puts the browser in a position of sharing information about the user derived from their browsing history with any site that can call the API, explained Guy. This is done in such a way that the user has no fine-grained control over what is revealed and in what context or to which parties. It also seems likely that a user would struggle to understand what is even happening. Data is gathered and sent behind the scenes quite opaquely. This goes against the principle of enhancing the user's control, and we believe it is not appropriate behavior for any software purporting to be an agent of a web user. And it's interesting that it got postponed again. That part is my opinion.
Cookie.
Yeah. I don't even know what to say about this. I'm not surprised it got postponed again, because if it actually did what it was supposed to, then the advertisers wouldn't like it. And if it, didn't do what it's supposed to, then the World Wide Web Consortium wouldn't like it. So I don't know if it's ever going to come in, and if it does, how well it will work. Because, well, you're getting a lot of this for free, and when you're getting it for free, that means you're the product, and they want as much information on you as possible, so you'll buy the next blingy blingy.
I don't know. I think people don't care about this kind of stuff as much as they perhaps should.
But there's enough people that actually do.
Yeah, to stop them from rushing something to the marketplace. Yeah.
Well, I understand what you're saying there, Bill. You'll find a lot of people that say that they have nothing to hide, so they don't care what gets sent out there. But it's not about what you have to hide; it's about what you have to protect.
Right. And Google has made some choices in recent days that has made it clear, in my mind at least, why you should care about these things, and it's all about how the things you do and the things that you type in a browser, the things you take pictures of and then back up to their free, if you will, cloud service, can be misinterpreted by people who feel it's incumbent upon them to take actions on things based on very, very vague idea sets. So my only thing, and I talk to normal people all the time, and I ask them, now you back up, and a lot of people don't even know their photos.
You
are
know
getting
normal
backed up.
people?
Yeah, I don't know if you know any of these or
Where are
not, but
those?
they're walking around out. You got to get. Well, they're easier to find around here. I'll tell you that.
What,
Um,
outside? That's not
uh,
going to happen.
I have to go outside to go to work.
What is this
But
outside of which you speak?
Look, when I go to work, you know who's there? More nerds.
yeah, I have to. I guess there's people like me out there, but most of the time I feel like a Martian in my line of work and the things I talk about. But it also offers the unique perspective of a normal person in these
And
conversations.
what's really bad is the nerds consider me a nerd because I do this Linux stuff.
Well, I don't think what you're talking about is people that know a lot about consumer electronics. Things that you can go to Best Buy and then take home and set up, and then because they know how to use
No,
those things, they're
they're
nerds.
nerds because they know things like Python and batch
Oh,
scripting, but they don't actually know Linux.
yeah. Well, in any case, the normal people that don't think about where the pictures go when they take the picture. I've asked these people, now if you had the choice between using this thing for free and throwing Google $10-15 a month and them not doing anything with your data.
Now, I would be willing to pay 10 or 15 bucks a month. I'd be willing to pay
Yeah.
like 30, 40 bucks a month for a service like that. The problem is that I wouldn't actually trust the company that I was paying to
Not even a
not be
little bit.
using my data.
Because they
Anyway.
have got paid tiers now for these things, and I still don't know whether you get any reliable measure of expectation of privacy with that kind of thing. I don't even know if they consider that the benefit of having a paid tier. I think they sell their paid tiers based on the increased capacity and things like that.
Well, you'd need to talk to Firecat about that. He's been using their top paid tier. His website moved almost a petabyte of data this last year.
Yeah. But does that mean that he's getting any more privacy than somebody who's paying?
Well,
nothing?
he feels private. I've talked to him about it. He feels like they're not doing anything with his data.
Oh, well,
I don't
there you
know.
go.
Well, let's move on,
Sure, why not?
please. Firefox 109, new features, updates, and fixes from Mozilla.org. The major changes. Manifest version 3, MV3 extension support is now enabled by default. MV2 remains enabled/supported. This major update also ushers in an exciting user interface change in the form of the new extensions button. The arbitrary code guard exploit protection has been enabled in the media playback utility processes, improving security for Windows users. We don't know any of those. The native HTML date picker for date and date time inputs can now be used with a keyboard alone, improving its accessibility for screen reader users. Users with limited mobility can also now use common keyboard shortcuts to navigate the calendar grid and month selection spinners. Effective on January 16th, colorways will no longer be in Firefox. Users will still be able to access saved and active colorways from the add-ons and themes menu option. The recently closed section of Firefox View now equips users with the ability to manually close/remove URL links from the list. And the empty state messages and graphics components surfaced in Firefox View for the tab pickup and recently closed sections have been updated for an improved user experience. I was worried about colorways. Why would they put something in, say we're going to end this in X number of months, and then just end it? Why bother adding it? It's got to take a lot of work
Did they
to put
say
in
that?
something like that. Yeah.
I mean, what a flash in the pan. I don't know. That is strange. I remember
when they announced it, they said it would be ending 2 versions from then.
But was it being used to like gather some kind of information to make something else in the future, or was it?
I think it was just a bone that they threw to users who wanted more colorful layouts of Firefox, and then said, well, you can use it and you can keep your settings after you use it, but it's not going to be here after this time. We're not going to support it.
Well, that's just stupid. Unless they offer it as an official add-on.
Or release it to the community.
Yeah. Oh, well. Firefox is another, or Mozilla is another company that we love dearly. We love that they exist. I give them money because they make Firefox, but they make some strange, or what seem to be strange decisions.
They keep making new choices, and they're trying to be innovative. And
innovative?
Yes.
Innovative?
Go ahead.
Innovative? I like that.
And
innovative. Innovative.
Go ahead, Joe.
And provide improvements so that people actually come back to Firefox.
Yeah.
But yeah, nobody really has so far, which is why they keep trying crazy crap.
Well, guys, that's the news.
That's a lot of news.
A lot of news. And security and privacy, you get nothing. So let's move to our bi-weekly wanderings. Well, for me, as anyone who listened to episode 402 knew, I spent the weekend of January 6th in Atlanta at my annual Filk convention, GAFILK. Apparently, those who listened did not include Bill or Joe, as I got some rather frantic messages as to whether I would be on the show. It was great to see all my friends again.
No, not from me. Not from me. You got messages from me asking if you were still alive, and that was the extent of it.
On behalf of Joe, I went ahead and sent messages to see how you were doing, because I was worried about you, Moss.
Yeah, well...
You didn't say anything to anybody.
I said in the meetings, I said why I wasn't going to meetings. I've been prefacing it for 2 months.
Prefacing it? You've been prefacing it?
Yes.
What an innovative word.
Let me continue, please.
Sure, why not?
It was great to see all my friends again after 3 years of COVID, and I had a great time. I sold a few more CDs, but not many. I'm still having some fun times, closed sarcasm font, with the T540p, this time being it didn't update a file and couldn't complete installing the latest kernel. I had to completely reinstall Mint and Bodhi on SDA 3 and 4. That took about 5 hours out of time I was supposed to be spending with my wife. Let me tell you, she was very appreciative of that. I then had Big Linux come up with a kernel panic and Q4OS have its own problems. In the end, I removed the Samsung SSD, which was primary, and made the Silicon Power SSD primary, since it's twice the size. I reinstalled the DVD drive and installed just Big Linux on the Silicon Power SSD. It looks like I'll be keeping this machine for just testing only. I think it's gotten too old to be reliable to have 5 or 6 distros on. I still have the Samsung drive intact. I think what I'm going to do, I've got a new Silicon Power SSD of that size that I was going to give to my wife since she was still running a very old, very weak SSD as her backup. And I think I'm going to take the Samsung and clone it to the Silicon Power and then give her the Samsung for her new drive and clone her old drive onto that. Okay, that's too much to talk about. My tongue's stopping to work here. School is back in, although every time someone spots a snowflake, they close the schools. I did get some work finally on Friday. That was my first day of the year. I don't remember whether I mentioned the new T580 for me and T590 for my wife in episode 402, but I have them and they're working. I cleared my T560 and have prepared it for sale and haven't posted it anywhere yet. Which means I have 3 machines and a dock for sale, one of which will need to be local only as it weighs too much to ship. That would be my HP Z800 workstation. We are working on Distro Hoppers Digest episode 40, quite a milestone. We have exceeded expectations once again in terms of listenership, and we have a new host for our podcast distribution. Google killed off yet another of its services, FeedBurner, so we have moved to Red Circle. We have offers to redo the website as well and are thinking about it. I've been letting itsmoss.com pretty much lay fallow. We have only had a few new articles in 2022, but we hope to pick it up again in 2023. I completed my first full calendar year in Full Circle Weekly News, and I'm getting some good feedback. Back on itsmoss.com, I did post an article detailing the time and effort it took to update from Mint 20.3 to 21.1.
How are you liking Red Circle?
I am not understanding Red Circle at this time. Dale is doing the work.
Oh, okay.
Dale and Tony.
It's relatively simple. I mean, it's what I'm using for the 2 shows that I've started.
The longer I'm on this show, the less I have actually to do with running it.
I mean, it's a different way of handling. This show is kind of unique in that with my 2 other shows, Red Circle is where I upload the media to, and then they just handle all the RSS and everything automatically. And it's a minimal set of things I have to do. Well, with mintCast, we've got our stuff up on archive.org, and then we've got a WordPress plugin on our website handling the RSS. So that is another option to avoid, having to pay for a service, but it requires a little bit more manual work, and you don't get the benefit of the metrics, the real-time metrics that you get with Red Circle.
I'm pretty sure that Dale basically did what you did.
Yeah.
Followed your example. We have noticed that our download statistics are way down. That could be because of the way they report downloads as opposed to the way Archive gets around to reporting them. We've never been really satisfied that Archive was actually giving us real numbers.
Yeah.
But it's all right. We continue to do
when
the
your
show.
numbers fluctuate down on Archive by like 500 or 600, then yeah, it's hard to, trust what they're saying.
Yeah, well, mintCast has had numbers as high as 6,000 or 8,000 per episode, and then there's been some episodes that are down around 1,500, 1,600.
Yep.
Well, that's it for me. What about you, Joe?
Well, I had some fun. My Pi hole had stopped working a while ago, and I finally got around to fixing it. At first, I tried to simply force an update on the whole thing by SSHing into it and doing an update manually. Sudo apt update and sudo apt upgrade. And that seemed to work. But then I set my router to use it as the DNS, and suddenly I had no internet. This was a common theme throughout the entire time that I was working on it. I also then pulled out a new micro SD card and started from the very beginning with a fresh headless Raspbian install, well, Raspberry Pi OS, excuse me. I was able to set up all the files to get it connected to the network headless and to turn on SSH. And then I was able to install Pi-hole and view the dashboard. But once again, when I would point the router to the Pi DNS, then my network would have no internet connection. The local networking still worked, but nothing else. It was very frustrating for my family with the network bouncing up and down like that, but it turns out the issue was not the Pi-hole or any of the setup on that because I attempted to change a lot of the settings in there and nothing helped. The issue turned out to be on the router side. Evidently, there were two locations with DNS settings, one for WAN and one for LAN. I was making changes on the WAN side, and I should have been making the adjustment on the LAN side. I guess that's understandable, but after all the attempted changes to the routing table and the global DNS that the Pi was using, I think that I have everything set up the way that I want, and it is working the way that I expect. I do wonder what else I can do with that Pi Zero at the same time. Pi-hole is not a very resource-intensive thing, and I think I could do more with that Pi. But then again, I don't want it doing too many things because that adds more chances for the whole thing to break down. Plus, I still have like 3 Pi Zeros that I can be using for other things, plus a Pi 4 and a Pi 3 and even a Pi 1. So I am looking for other projects that would be good for that. I'm thinking it might be fun to move my audio bookshelf instance to a Pi Zero, but that would also require me to set up a large external hard drive for it. I also got a low-cost portable router because I couldn't find any of the ones that I already have for some reason. I was able to get it set up in my garage so that I could have a closer Wi-Fi connection for a couple of my devices that were having issues connecting to the network that's in the other room. Really cleaned up a lot of the issues that I was having with my 1GX, my little mini laptop. Now, I'm still playing around with PSPs for a while yet, but with the new methods to custom ROM the PS Vita and the things that you can do with it, I would really like to get one of them one of these days. The price is still a bit high for them, even the broken ones. And I kind of understand the device. The device was ahead of its time, and for how much it can play when rooted, it still seems... Sorry, I just jumped like from the part I was reading to some random parted page somewhere. I don't know what happened. Okay, the price still seems a bit high even for the broken ones, and I kind of understand that the device was ahead of its time, and for how much it can play when rooted, it still seems like it's very competitive to modern mid-range handhelds. And with the PS Network shutting down for them, either the price will skyrocket as more people use them for emulation, or the price will drop as people move away from them. I need less expensive hobbies. But I do want to eventually get the Vita, custom ROM it, or whatever it's called, root it so that you can play whatever you want to on it and use it as an emulation system. And then I also have a PS3 that I would like to see if I can stream from. Also, next week, my 20th wedding anniversary is coming up. And I do want to do something for nice for that, but it kind of depends on what my wife wants.
Lots of jewelry.
The usual. All the things she says she does not want.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Well, Bill, what have you been up to?
Oh, gee whiz. So last week, Leo, Norbert, and I recorded our first episode of Linux OTC, and I think that went well. It's linked in the show notes to the website, by the way. The recording went on for over an hour and 42 minutes, and incidentally, it was the reason I didn't make Roundtable. But the conversation was engaging and interesting from start to finish. Originally, I intended to focus that particular episode on introductions, maybe some origin stories, and even predictions, but the conversation quickly took on a life of its own, meaning that it just spun off in different directions. I have no regrets, as this was my original intent with regards to the format of the show. Um, I was surprised when Friday night on the way back from Tennessee, I received a notification on the WordPress app on my phone indicating a comment on the website for episode one. At first, I imagined it would take some time before anyone even knew we existed. But after checking the metrics on Red Circle, I was delighted to see over 130 downloads. Not bad for a debut, I think, if I do say so myself. Right now, episodes drop at midnight U.S. Eastern Time on the Sundays, opposite those which mintCast streams. I'm excited for the future of the show and look forward to any input we can get from the community. Head over to linuxotc.org for all the info you need. Right now, we have a very small social networking footprint, which is to say that we've got an email address and we've got a Discord channel. I think there's a grand total of 3 of us on that Discord at this moment. I could be wrong. But these are things that'll grow organically, I think. But yeah, that's happening. So this past week, I decided to see what the state of Wayland on Plasma is and how well I can get it to work on my Omen. I've got I don't remember the model number, but it's an HP Omen laptop with the NVIDIA Optimus chipset. For those of you that don't know what that is, it's some of these laptops that ship with an NVIDIA card also have an SoC video card installed so as to not use more battery than absolutely necessary. And support for those on Linux has been kind of, I mean, it's there, but it ain't, or it wasn't. For several years now, I've been using a project called Optimus Manager to switch back and forth between the NVIDIA graphics card and the integrated Intel SoC. This only worked on Xorg, so I didn't spend a lot of time paying attention to how things were going on Wayland. The thing about that method is that you can only choose one or the other. You can't be like running your Intel and then decide you want to, or at least I could never get it to work, decide, okay, I want to open Steam using the NVIDIA card, but then the minute that closes, go back to editing my documents and all that with the integrated. You had to choose one or the other, and if you wanted to switch it, you had to log out and log back in. So that's kind of a no-go for me. And the biggest thing is it only worked on Xorg. About a year ago, I switched back to Xorg and started using that again. I was on Wayland and I thought things were working, but they really weren't. It was using the Intel card and telling me that it was the NVIDIA card. But this past week, I decided to give it a shot, and I booted it up and logged into the Wayland session, got rid of Optimus Manager and disabled the service and all that, and found out right away that the Wayland experience has been where all of the improvement has gone, because immediately everything... See, the other problem is it's also got a 4K screen, and 4K is a bit of in my opinion, a gimmick, or it was my opinion until this, because even on Plasma, you had this, some things would scale correctly, some things would not, and some applications just didn't behave well at all while being scaled. Well, that was under X. When I switched to Wayland seemed to understand how to deal with that screen better than Xorg did. In fact, when I booted it up, everything looked great, and I go to the display settings to see if if it was applying any kind of scaling, which it was. It was showing everything at 200%, and then on Xorg you would click on the resolution settings, and you had a choice between like a dozen different settings. Well, on Wayland, I went to the resolution settings, and it said, nope, this thing only supports 4K. If you want to change that, then change the scaling, and of course the scaling applied in real time and worked great. And I thought, man, that's really something. But what about Optimus? What about the NVIDIA card? Well, there's apparently the officially supported method is to use a thing called Optimus, or prime run is the command you would use. You just append prime run to the command that would open whatever piece of software you wanted to use the NVIDIA card, and then that piece of software would run with the GPU, the NVIDIA GPU, and by golly, it worked great. So it starts and it runs with the Intel graphics, and then you append prime run and then Steam, blah, 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 whatever. It's a little bit of a pain in the butt because you got to go into your menu options. There's not an easy, like, GUI way of picking things that you want to start with. Not that I'm aware of, anyway. There might be something out there, but
No. Oh, I'm just going to interject here because, it used to be like a real pain to set up the NVIDIA drivers if you had hybrid graphics. Used to be. But because I had entire episodes of this show where we went through and I was trying to set up the hybrid drivers for this laptop right here, which has NVIDIA N60M in it. And the whole process of using, like, I think it was called Bumblebee or something like
Yeah.
that to get it set up. But that was a long time ago. Now, like, basically I install the NVIDIA drivers and it automatically goes between the Intel and the NVIDIA, and I can see that in the NVIDIA X server settings. And this is, of course, through Xorg. I don't have Wayland set up, so and yeah, it is a really simple setup, and I can see which applications are, or I could formally see. I'd have to go through and find it again. See which applications are using Intel and which ones are using NVIDIA, and I think I can even force use or tell specific applications to use the NVIDIA as opposed to the Intel.
yeah,
And then
that's
I
what
can
the
also
prime run does. It forces it.
Yeah, I can also like change things to either like NVIDIA performance mode, which will bias using the NVIDIA, and since I'm not on battery, that's perfectly fine. Or I can put it on demand mode, or I can put it into power saving mode.
All I can say is that somebody at NVIDIA has been watching too much Transformers.
Yeah, and
You
all
keep
these
talking
projects.
Optimus Prime, and Joe just mentioned Bumblebee, and I'm going, come on now.
Yeah.
Where did the Decepticons come into this?
I think it was all born out of them using the Optimus naming convention, and then all of the projects kind of spun off of that in terms of naming. But I was happy with the performance I was getting, and OBS Studio is working with Wayland now too, which was kind of a reason. I remember my very first episode of mintCast, I was using that machine, and I was trying to get OBS to work because I was going to do the streaming, and I wasn't able to capture a screen. I wasn't able to capture the Discord screen. Well, now that works. So that was, and I, oh, that was on Arch too, by the way. I don't know if I mentioned that or not. Yeah. I was so satisfied with the project or the progress of Wayland on the NVIDIA Optimus. enabled machine, I decided to try my luck and see how well gaming has progressed in the last year. And yeah, that's how long it's been since I've done any gaming. Um, so I went for broke, installed Steam, and I downloaded Skyrim and let her rip. Skyrim was the one game that was giving me problems even after the Steam Deck was announced. I
Oh
was
yeah.
still having a little bit of trouble with the sound, uh, just because of the way it splits up the tracks. Well, downloaded that, let her rip, and under Wayland, uh, I added Prime Run to the command. Now you're saying I don't need to do that. It'll just choose the GPU.
It should.
I'm gonna have to try that. Um, and you can also use, I think it's NVTop as it looks just like HTOP except it's looking at your GPUs and it lays it out the same way HTOP does, and that works pretty good for monitoring how well. And it shows like each thing that it's running, and it shows which card that's running it and all that. So, little tidbit there. So I downloaded Skyrim, and under Wayland, it worked. It worked swimmingly. Everything just worked.
No,
So
I do like hearing that, and that makes me want to try Wayland because there are massive problems trying to run Skyrim under Xorg, or at least there was last time I did it. Because even when you can get the sound working correctly, which is jumping through a whole bunch of hoops, I still had problems where it would lock up in the first portion of the game. Like, it wouldn't leave that first scene in the back of the wagon.
yeah,
Yeah, it would just get stuck there, and you'd be just traveling in that wagon for forever.
what I was getting was, and I didn't get past the wagon scene a year ago. Um, it was you could see it running, the wagon going and the stuff passing by, and you could hear the music playing, but you couldn't hear the voices
Yeah, that
because
was another one. That was another
and
one.
so I thought, okay, so where are we at on this now? And the first thing I noticed when you install Skyrim and then you go and you start it, it like measures your GPU capability and then automatically sets, what it thinks you ought to be using. I think it's like low, mid, high, and ultra. And right away, it put mine on ultra, and it never did that before either. It always chose the lowest GPU setting. That is the interesting thing is it did that on both my Omen running Arch, and then when I installed it on this machine that's got a Ryzen 7 with the AMD graphics, the exact same thing, and the experience was perfectly usable on both, and it was synced. And actually, I'm getting better performance here on this machine. Better meaning on the Omen, I'm getting a little bit of screen tearing, which is a little irritating, but I don't know if that's got more to do with the fact that it's kind of an older, maybe not so great NVIDIA card, and it's running with the highest settings, or what that might be. But it's working here on Mint 21.1 just as well, if not better than on that NVIDIA. Running on Arch, running Wayland, because you're not getting Wayland here on Mint. So that's a happy story indeed. I also installed Halo Master Chief. Again, the game ran with the highest video settings, and I think Master Chief always worked kind of good for me, though. So, at this point, those are the two games that probably, of the games that I have, they're probably the most graphic intensive. So if those work, pretty much everything. And I'm not a big gamer, but I've got this academic interest in these things working on Linux. So there you go. Yeah, so gaming on Linux for the win. But that's about all I've got.
And that about wraps up our bi-weekly wanderings. So let's move on to our Linux innards. Well, this episode, we just got the wild idea that we could talk about what our favorite distros are and distros that we've been watching for the future. And obviously, when we're talking favorite distros, the first thing we talk about is Mint.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to do this a bit more free form, and then Bill kind of put all his stuff at the bottom there. So, when it comes
My
to
bad.
like Mint, yeah, no worries. I feel like Mint is a very drop it in and use it type of thing. While it is extremely customizable, if that's your thing, you can use it without any modification. It's good for anyone that is used to older operating systems, similar to XP, meaning that it can work for older users or less technical users. Mostly for me and for anybody that I install it for, it just works. So if my grandma were to say that her Windows machine was bothering her, I would set her up with Linux Mint and see how things work from there.
It's yeah, uh, it's the distro that I set up for people that just need it to work, and I don't, have to do a lot of IT support for them.
Okay, voting. Which desktop?
I like Cinnamon, but Mate is just as good, I would say, to set up for someone else.
I
Bill?
think, yeah, of course I'm running Cinnamon on this machine right here, but I don't. If I'm setting it up for somebody else, I almost never choose Cinnamon just because. And I know it's completely anecdotal, but in the early days of Cinnamon, I had some problems with it.
Well, it
And
used to crash all
Sometimes,
too.
yeah. Sometimes even with an update, you'll go back to that whole Cinnamon needs to restart pop
yeah,
up coming up. But that you rarely lasts for more than a day or two. But yeah, I guess Mate would be a bit more stable.
yeah, I think it's probably
Yeah,
Mate or XFCE or
I
probably
would
just
vote Mate. I don't know anyone using XSCE in Mint, but I'm sure there are a lot of people who are doing it or they wouldn't keep putting it out.
I
I tend to install XFCE or Mate or both in the background for remote access stuff.
Hmm.
it's slightly lighter. I mean, like very slightly lighter than Mate. I don't know. Um, I've got 3 people I've set them up with Mint XFCE because they preferred the Whisker menu over the Brisk menu. It is what it is. Because I'll show it to people in a virtual machine. Do you prefer this or do you prefer that? After people get over how nerdy of a thing that is to do, then it seems like most normal people seem to prefer the XFCE version. Make of that what you will.
Mm.
So, what you
Okay.
got for us next, Joe?
Well, next on my list, technically this was the order that they were listed on here, but Fedora is really like third on my list. Um, Now, Fedora is one of those distros that has a great community behind it and instructions for just about everything you could want to do on it. And it can act as a drop-in replacement, but I found it more useful on like a touch screen or a tablet than some other operating systems. And it is really not my favorite for multi-monitor, but it is somewhat easy to use. Now, some of that is probably more a reflection of GNOME than it is Fedora, and if I installed a different desktop on Fedora, then maybe it would work better for multi-monitor. But yeah, really what attracts me to using that as an alternative for Mint is the fact that there is that community around it and the development for it. And all of the instructions and tutorials that you can get to get it running the way that you want.
Yeah, that's pretty much on the bottom of my list, but I know my late friend John Noggle ran Fedora and kept trying to talk me into running it. And I've tried it a few times, but I just can't.
I
It
still
I,
doesn't
don't.
play well. It doesn't play well with other versions of Linux, but on its own, Fedora is pretty good.
I just
Well,
kinda,
that one time Josh Hawk had given me that Dell laptop and he'd set it up with Fedora, and I looked at it and I go, yuck. And I probably put something else on it and then said, well, I need to try Fedora. And I put Fedora back on and I go, yuck. And I put something else on and then said, well, I need to be doing Fedora on here. And I go, yuck again. And I eventually just sold that Dell laptop to Dale.
I'm
'Cause
of
I,
two minds with Fedora because on one hand, it is a good option for like gamers that want to have the up to date kernel, and you're getting packages a heck of a lot faster on there. But on the other hand, I can never set it up for somebody that needs something, set it up and run because there are hoops that you have to jump through to get things like
This
codecs
is
and
definitely not something that you just like hand to your grandma.
no, it's not. Um, because I think I ran it, I don't know, about 10 years ago. I was running it as the daily driver. And that was because in those days there was a project out there called Corora, which was based on Fedora, but it came out of the box with the codecs and everything just working. I think it had RPM Fusion built into it day one. And then I just kind of, one day I had to do a reboot or a reinstall and decided I'd just go with the regular version of Fedora and figure out how to get all that stuff working. And I don't remember it being elegantly straightforward. So yeah, on one hand, is it great for power users? Yeah, but I think they don't market it as being easy to use, or at least easy in the way we say something like Mint is easy.
Yeah, but it's a good way to get into RPM, which is good if you're planning on working with a lot of Red Hat servers in the future. So yeah, it's a good way to learn, and it is definitely not a bad option.
No.
well, next on the list is Bodhi. I wonder who wrote this list. It might have been me.
It was you.
Well, Bodhi's my favorite. It's super light, quick, and has a special desktop. Moksha is based on an Enlightenment E17, made more stable and featuring all the working functions of later versions backported. Version 6 has been out for a while. Version 7 is just ahead. It's a small but friendly international team, and they still support 32-bit machines. Version 5.1 is final based on Ubuntu 18.04. They had a version 6 beta based on Debian 11, and they have just they got it to beta and then had to start working. 22.04 came out, and they had to start working on the next version of Bodhi, and so they're going to be working on 32-bit as version 7 when they get done working on the 64-bit version 7.
No,
But there's really only 3 main team members. Jeff Hoagland started it, but he's no longer on the team, and apparently some money has still been going to him, and he's not turning it over. But Robert Wiley is in Georgia, and then we got Stefan in Hungary, and we got Hippie Taff. I think he's in UK. I could be wrong about that. Technically, I'm on the team, but basically, I just open my mouth every now and again and give them a little bit of money.
You talk about fast. Bodhi is fast, folks. I mean,
that's because it's a lightweight.
I
It's
mean,
It is a
probably
whole
something-
different concept from the other desktops.
yeah.
Moksha, you
Point,
don't have
click,
to ever
boom.
find the menu. You just click on the desktop and the menu pops up.
Yeah.
It sounds like something that I'll need to try out in the future, especially, just the fact that they still have a 32-bit version, and I still have some netbooks floating around.
Well, they
Great
still
option
support
for
their
a netbook.
5.1 32-bit, and like I say, the beta seems to be pretty usable of version 6. But they do intend to continue supporting 32-bit, yeah. If you haven't tried Bodhi, you need to give it a shot. It's just enough different that you'll wonder either how it works or why you haven't had anything work like that before.
Does it do well with multi-monitor support?
I have not tried multi-monitor support. I would guess no, but that's just me. Okay,
Actually,
next on the list.
I'm sorry, Moss.
Go ahead.
I've heard somebody say Enlightenment handles multi-monitor better than some other bigger desktops. So
Well, the problem with Enlightenment is they keep moving on with new features and they don't ever try and make it stable. The most stable version they've had is 17, and they're currently, I think, on 25. And so Moksha, they try and backport as many of the working features as they can. But again, it's a small team. I don't know. I don't have multiple monitors, so I can't answer that.
I do, but I'm not gonna install it on this thing. Maybe I will if I do a nuke and pave in the future. Occasionally, I'll do that.
Well, the next on the list is an up and comer. I've seen a lot of people say that this might be the distro you try and never distro hop again. And that's Big Linux, which is a Manjaro derivative out of Brazil. Runs Plasma Desktop, but it runs it like you've never seen. I don't see any configuration issues. And they pretty much tossed Discover overboard and set up something called Big Store, which works beautifully. Big Store includes Flatpaks, Snaps, AUR, and the native programs all in one store, although they tend to fill out the AUR in the second slot, and there's a lot of AUR, so you have to scroll down quite a bit to get to the Snaps and Flatpaks. But it's really, I ran it for a month on my T460 and then got a kernel panic. It is now the only thing on the T460. What am I talking about? I don't have a 460. I have a 540p that it's running on. And it runs really well, but I haven't run it long enough to. They do updates internally rather than expecting you to go and update the repo and do the updates after updating the repo. It all runs internally. It's supposed to be for new users, but I haven't run it long enough to know how long that goes before it breaks. And maybe it doesn't break.
But yeah, I'm looking at the website here. I have looked at this before. They've got a lot of different layouts that they're showing here, and it does look like
Well, it's difficult to get me to run Arch on anything, and I just saw enough. I know eBuzz Central really raved about it, and I said, well, I'll try it. I didn't have any more Debians to try. I was ragging myself for doing 3 straight Debian-based distros. But it's easy to use. It's easy to set up. It's everything that you thought you wanted in Linux. I just don't know how stable it is long term.
Yeah, that's the thing about these really, I don't know, aggressively these
Really
flash in the
new?
pan type distros. You know, you just never know because this is a lot of stuff to maintain.
Right.
A
How long
distro
is it
like
going to
this.
stick around
Yeah.
for? Is it going to be here this time next year?
Right.
Well, it's been around a lot of years now. It just didn't get noticed until recently.
Mm.
Their main versions are in Brazilian Portuguese and English, but they have many other languages supported.
Cool one, folks. Go check it out. BigLinux.com.
The next one on the list is another of my old favorites, OpenMandriva LX5 and Rome. Now, 5 isn't out yet. They're still on 4.3, but it runs great. This is the most complete remaining distro in the Mandrake lineage. LX5 is in testing, and Rome is rolling, has already been tested, and is ready to accept the V5 files when they arrive. To be honest, it's a slow roller. The team does not like releasing apps before they're fully tested. A large and friendly community makes this a distro to pay attention to, and the Plasma Desktop has been polished to the level of sheer beauty. When you boot up OpenMandriva on your laptop, you're just blown away by how pretty the laptop is. I mean, yes, it's only a wallpaper. And yes, there is some opening music that is gorgeous. But the fact that it's all put together and it's laid out right there, and even if you're doing multi-booting, your boot menu becomes just as beautiful.
There's something to be said about a distro that just starts up right from the beginning. Just, you know, some distros are okay when you start them up. Everything's there, but some it's as though they're really trying to make you happy when they start up. And I think Open Mandriva is one of those where they it mattered to somebody to put in the effort to make that first initial experience a positive one.
And you do get that a lot with KDE Plasma, or well, with Plasma, I mean.
If it's set up right.
Yeah.
Yeah, the team is very international, but seems to have about half of its uh, devs in France. Ben Ballard is very friendly and welcoming to anyone coming into the community. So they do everything right. What can you say? I don't know why I'm not using it all the time, but it's a distro you need to check out.
Okay. And next on the list is Garuda, which I put on the list. This is one of my favorite backup distros because it's very full featured and still easy to use with its installer. It's a good choice, like out of the box for gaming, if you want to be on essentially the bleeding edge of tech. Now, it is an Arch distro, so yeah, I just threw out and I run Arch. And it has a modified version of the KDE Plasma 5 desktop environment, which looks great. But it also comes with many others that you can run through the installer, including Cinnamon, which does make it very, very like easy to run. And their welcome page is great, and it leads you to all of the different tools to either update or install whatever you want installed. And it also uses the Calamaris graphical installer. It is also a really new distro in that it came out in 2020. So it has not been around for very long, but I really like what it has offered so far. And it is much more of a, or at least it feels like much more of a heavyweight operating system. It's like its minimum requirements are 30 gig of storage to start off with and 4 gig RAM. But it does seem extremely usable for an Arch distro.
The devs for this distro are based in India, unlike you would think that Bodhi was with all the Hindu words that they use, but it's not. But Garuda is a India-based distro. Josh Hawk has been having a lot of trouble with this one, and I've tried installing it a couple times and not been able to finish. So it might depend on what equipment you've got.
Yeah, I didn't have any trouble with it, and I think I was running it on a laptop. No, I was running it on a tablet. But I thought it worked well. I didn't have any issues, but I haven't run it in a while either. So if they've had any recent updates that broke something. And well, next on my list was MX Linux, because it's extremely lightweight and does have a 32-bit version. It's been my choice for lower resource systems. It's still modern while being like a full-fledged operating system. It's not as pared down as something like Puppy or DSL. It's still good for older hardware and lower cost hardware, and it's just been my choice for that purpose for a really long time now. And it does start up with the XFCE as its main desktop environment, but there is a freestanding KDE Plasma version, and also as of 2021 a standalone Fluxbox implementation.
I will point out that XSCE back in 2021 got a little bit heavier. They decided to fix a bunch of things and it costs them memory. It's not as light as Bodhi, but if you're wanting something that looks like Windows, XSCE looks a lot more like Windows than Moksha does.
Yeah, and XFCE and Fluxbox both have the 32-bit editions, but KDE has 64-bit only. Yeah, it has been around for a long time, and it is what I use on any of my lower resource systems that would have trouble running Mint on a day-to-day basis. Now, doesn't sound like anybody else has anything to say on MX other than what Moss added, so I'm going to move on to Ubuntu. And, Ubuntu is an obvious choice as a replacement for Mint if you don't want to install Mint for whatever reason. Other than some philosophical issues with the packaging system and choosing the desktop that you want, it is extremely easy to transition from Mint or really anything else. This would not be my first go-to simply because I'm more used to Mint, and if I'm going to go out of my way to install something else, then it's either going to be Garuda or MX or Fedora, depending on my needs. But it is a good, solid choice. It does have a very large community behind it, and there are several versions that you can get with different desktops as the primary instead of getting one and installing your own. So that there's Kubuntu, Xubuntu, there's Ubuntu Mate. I don't know why that's not called
Which is
Moobuntu.
part of the problem with Ubuntu. For a new user, you first have to decide what desktop you want, and a new user might not even know what the desktops are, and to see this
Right.
whole list of things, and they're each on different websites.
The thing is,
It provides too much choice.
well, new users, at least in my experience, are almost always steered to Linux by somebody like us. And we tell them to go and get Ubuntu. We tell them to go and try Ubuntu from ubuntu.com, or whatever direct path we lay out for them. So I don't know if that's really an issue, all the choice, because
Well, if they have someone like us to talk to, that's true.
yeah, I just don't see people that don't have somebody like us going and looking for Linux
Well,
or
I didn't.
even well, you're like us.
Yeah.
You're
Anyhow,
one of us. One of us.
Yeah,
yeah,
but
if you don't like snaps, don't use Ubuntu. It's that
That's
simple.
that's basically the big thing.
and most people don't care.
They absolutely don't. And if you didn't know that there was a difference between this package and that package,
And honestly, most of the outcry involving snaps was the fact that people weren't told that they were getting a snap instead of a deb.
yeah, well,
And then they started substituting snaps for debs without telling anybody.
Yeah.
they did that once, and then they really underestimated, I think, the reaction that the community would have by that, because the thing you got to understand about Ubuntu, and anybody that's going to go and use Ubuntu, the first thing Ubuntu will consider when making decisions is how this will impact their customer base. This is a profit. I'll say profit driven. I'm not saying that in a negative sense, but this is a company that has a product that is based on Linux. And so when they go to make decisions about technical directions to go, first and foremost, they are considering how this will affect their commercial offering. Okay. And if it makes more sense to provide Chromium as a snap, because now we can more effectively maintain that for all the different versions of Ubuntu that we're providing support for, then that's the direction we're going to go. But I think they've made I'm not going to say mistakes, but I think they've underestimated the backlash that they would get, or they're just so jaded by it that they figure that no matter what decision they make, since it's canonical, they're going to get backlash for it. So they
Yeah.
might as well do what they
Well,
think is right.
the last 3 years, Canonical has basically been reorganizing along the lines of what we can make money with as a business,
Yeah.
and to the point that this year they are expecting to go IPO.
Uh, yeah. I, s- I suppose. I didn't want to come out and say that because it's almost a meme at this point too. But I mean that's a logical next step, isn't it? That they would go
Well, for
IPO.
years they were denying the fact that they were even thinking about it, but now they've actually announced it.
Yeah. But for all the people that are so hard on Ubuntu because of the snaps direction, and then some people will use the fact that Ubuntu Mate's got Flatpak built right into it day one. Well, right there's your evidence that the developers were against it. Well, no, not really. It's just those developers are not maintaining a quote commercial product, so they can go in the direction that they want to, that they think is technically more suitable for the user base that they have, and yeah, it's arguable that perhaps flat packs are a better way to go for a distro or a flavor of the distro that might be more suitable for regular users than Ubuntu proper is.
Well, let's let Bill hit on. It looks like we've covered everything but Debian and Elementary, and then we can hit our honorable mentions.
Well,
And your server distros, yeah.
yeah, I just made, I wasn't real, I guess I should have read what everybody else wrote, but I made a
Of
couple
course
of
you should
lists.
have.
Well, I
That's
made
why we
a,
did it as a team.
yeah, and I apologize, folks. Um, I made two lists. What I made was a top-down sort of list, like a um, top five from my least favorite to my most favorite. Now, understand that this is not me saying that every other distro out there is crap and these are the only five that I would ever use. This list is really just based on the things that I have used in anger and have gotten the most success out of. Um, First on the list is Elementary OS. Elementary OS should really be considered whenever you're talking about distributions that you can just install and run and have that expectation of it working well. If you're not looking to make a lot of changes, if you're not overly opinionated about the way your distro should look and run, you can install this and it'll work well. And it is an entire, it's a bubble within our ecosystem, isn't it? They've got their own.
Walled garden is a frequently used term.
It kind of is. I mean, you've got access to all the same software anybody else does, but this is a design scheme or a design paradigm that was well thought out from top to bottom, and so it probably will work really well. Now, it's not for everybody, just for two reasons. One, that you can't change a lot, and the other is that it's laid out in a way that's comparable to other operating systems, and that's just because, not because they're trying to clone the other operating system. It's because there are things about the design experience or the user experience that uh, they felt was positive, and so they did the best they could to sort of emulate some of that. Next on the list is Ubuntu, and yeah, for all the same reasons we were talking about earlier, it it's a good choice for something you want to install relatively quickly and just use, and like you can install 2204 on it right now and it'll work until what, 2026. So if you want to put something on somebody's machine and not have to worry about it for a while, Ubuntu is a good choice. Now, I put Debian on here just because Debian is Debian proper is probably a bit more versatile in my mind if you know your way around it as far as setting it up for different systems. Um, some 32-bit systems I've set up, I've used Debian because they still maintain a 32-bit install, and then you can still get LXDE. They've actually got a light version where they use the LXDE desktop, which I still believe is a good choice for lightweight systems. Next down is Mint, and we all love Mint, and we all know why we love Mint. That's why we're here. And then Arch. Arch has been it's been my favorite because it makes you learn how your
Yeah.
machine works.
Yeah,
And
for the honorable mentions, Arch and Debian were both on there, so
Yeah.
I do want to add a little bit there before you move on to your server stuff.
Okay. Yeah, Arch. You can make Arch. You can make Arch into Garuda and Endeavor OS, and you can make Endeavor and Garuda into Arch just by adding and taking away repositories, or just a simple install of certain tools that are used. And that's really what, in a nutshell, any distribution. Arch is really kind of the anti-distro, isn't it? Because it's not. It's kind of the install script to give you this thing, and then you're kind of up to on your own as far as how it's set up. They don't make any assumptions or decisions on how you want your machine set up. So if you are a very opinionated person about what things are used and how things are set up, Arch is always going to be the way to go for somebody
Yeah,
like that.
Not
that,
quite
that
LFS, but yeah.
Yeah.
yeah, that's why Arch made my list, and it's because it is the base for so many other distributions, and it is completely scalable from the bare minimum that you need to every add-on you could imagine. And yeah, it really is just awesome how much you can add to Arch.
Now the one limitation is the one thing that Debian has on top of that is the 32-bit
Yep.
installation, so it's not appropriate for older machines, which
Yeah.
Well, you could also
But
mention stability, but
yeah, and that's another reason
okay.
that Debian also made my list there, is because it is the base for so much. It's like the granddaddy of all of the releases that we talk about that aren't Arch based. So
And as far as stability goes, that's a difficult subject to broach too with Arch, because when people run into trouble with Arch, it's, in my opinion, it is not due to stability. It is due to something not lining up after an update, and you're always encouraged to go read the front page of Arch Linux. What is it? ArchLinux.org, I think. And they will tell you if there's an update that will break something, and you want to keep that in mind. You want to make the necessary changes. Another problem people will run into is installing things from the AUR. You know, sometimes a tool chain will up and change on a repository installed program, and then you still have an AUR installed program that didn't get updated, and it needs to be rebuilt against this new tool chain. These
yeah,
are things a user needs to learn how to do.
and
and
these are things that a user that uses a Debian-based or a RHEL-based distro doesn't have to worry about.
Yeah, no, I mean,
that's true too.
it's
But
true, but
the Arch Wiki exists, and
yeah,
it is extremely useful if a bit hard to navigate. And one of the main problems, which Bill was edging into, I think, there, is that as things change, the Arch Wiki doesn't always change as quickly. And there are old articles there that you will think, oh, this is perfect, this will solve my problem. And then you start going through and you find out that the instructions don't work because, well, the tool chain doesn't exist anymore, or one of the tools that was installed there simply isn't supported anymore and is uninstallable.
yeah.
This is why you don't give Arch to a new user.
No, you never would. Arch, yeah, I mean that's just ridiculous. Um, and sometimes I do worry that these projects that make a lot of effort in the direction of making Arch easier, I worry that may, oh well, that's a good distro to give to a new user. Even Manjaro. Now Manjaro probably does the absolute best job of making Linux palatable for uh, maybe less. I don't want to say technically inclined, because even Manjaro sort of commands a more intermediate user, I suppose, because you still have the risk of running into problems with something like Manjaro. I don't think it should ever be handed to a new user. People should probably find their own way to an Arch-based distribution, and by extension, like a Gentoo-based distribution. And you should have a reason for using these things, because if your reason is just that you want more up-to-date software, then maybe something like Fedora is a better choice, because you're less likely to run into the same kind of problems.
Well, let's hit our honorable mentions, and then if Bill wants to talk about servers, he can.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, a lot of the stuff got covered there. Now, Raspberry Pi OS, because, well, Raspberry Pis. Now, you can run Ubuntu on them and things like that, but a lot of the instructions that are out there on in the community for Raspberry Pi, everything is based on either Raspbian, which is an older version of Raspberry Pi OS, or it's based on Raspberry Pi OS. So a lot of times installing that just really makes doing all of the projects easier. Now, on my list, I also have mentioned Alpine. Now, Alpine isn't one of those things that you install and use, at least, not for me. But it's an extremely stripped down version of Linux, and it gets used for making like Docker images. So it's the base for a lot of Docker images. And then you take that stripped down version, you add in what you need, absolutely need, to make your Docker image work, and then you release it out into the wild. And then next on my list is SteamOS. And SteamOS, I think, is an Arch backend, but it's a lot more controlled by, Steam. And the reason I mention it is because it's actually like shifted the market, the percentage of Linux that's being used in the wild by a couple of percentage points, if I remember right.
Now, can you get an ISO for this?
You can, but it's kind of a hack around. We're still waiting for an official release of the SteamOS Arch version, so that you can like install it on a desktop. We got promised that last year. It has not officially happened yet. And I'm pretty sure that like the V2 of the Steam will be out before that happens.
Yep, store.steampowered.com/steamos/build your own. That's how far they've come. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's cool that they're offering that as an option, though, I think, because it's like they know that people that are into what they got going on are very likely to be nerds, and enjoy the opportunity to build something out of Steam. Valve is a exceptional company, in my opinion. In this
Now, there is also Hollow ISO, which is basically a team that put together an installable version of SteamOS.
Presumably using the tools that Steam offered from the website.
Well, I'm sure that there's someone out there that has completely pulled the image off of a Steam Deck and either started running it in a VM or started pulling everything out so that they could completely rebuild it for a desktop. But even then, that wouldn't be official.
And as Joe has pointed out, we haven't talked about Linux Mint Debian Edition.
Right. It also made my list of honorable mentions. It's not... Well, I've installed it to test it to see how it works and compared to, regular Linux Mint. and yeah, it does. It kind of skips that whole Ubuntu stage that we were talking about. Debian being, the granddaddy, and then that would make Ubuntu the daddy. So Linux Mint Debian Edition cuts out that middleman there, and it seems to work really well. It's not really like building in popularity or anything, but I do think it was important for it to be on the list because it is that merger between Linux Mint and Debian.
Well, I'm drawing up a blank right now. Are they based on the testing version of Debian or the stable?
Stable.
See that? I wonder how well it would work if you switched it over to the testing version, because then you would have the benefit of Mint, but you would have more up-to-date packages. So I know I tried. We did a thing last year when the newest version of LMDE came out, and I tried to switch it over to SID, and it just folded up like a cheap 10 on me. So yeah, it did some pretty strange things.
And the last thing on our list is KDE Neon, which some people will scream, that's not a distro.
Oh, it certainly is.
Basically, you've got Ubuntu base or Ubuntu core, and then you've got the latest Plasma on top of it.
Right.
And the problem with it for most people is it's always updating.
Yeah. Which it's always updating the KDE stuff, yeah.
Yeah.
Because KDE.
And on the other hand, it's running LTS on the Ubuntu stuff. So
right.
You've got old stuff from
Interesting.
Ubuntu and the latest thing on KDE.
It would be interesting if they would put their do release upgrade tool in that, and then you could, if you wanted to, you could update the underlying Ubuntu, or that's just me talking out of my hind end, I guess. But um, I've ran it before, and you install KDE Neon, and you get a very limited installation of packages, but you get a full up-to-date version of KDE. But you can achieve
And
that.
you know what you want to run anyhow. You don't need to like most
Oh,
times
absolutely.
when I put in a new distro on my machine, I have to start deleting the stuff I don't use or don't
Yeah,
want.
yeah. And that's why some distributions that offer the minimal installation is it's kind of cool, because yeah, I mean, people that use Linux are by and large, I think, opinionated about the things they use, and that's not always the mainstream stuff that you're used to seeing in default installations.
Okay, tell us about server distros, Bill.
Okay, so um, I have uh, I've amassed a considerable amount of server chops in the last year. Well, I guess it goes back further than that, because I've had like file servers and stuff going on to connect Kodi to and things like that. I don't manage servers for companies. I drive a truck for a living, so this list is completely home-based server derived. That being said, um, first is Debian, and for many of the same reasons as we discussed earlier, except Debian is a good choice for a server as well, because it will give you a very minimal base. If you're not going to depend on snaps or anything, it's a good way to go, because it's not going to update on you very often. It's just going to work. So if you want to set something up and then put a website on it or something like that, that is probably even the best choice. CentOS. So CentOS used to be a
CentOS Stream, you mean?
oh yeah CentOS is what they're calling it now. Now CentOS, as it were, used to be the free, non-commercially supported clone of Red Hat Enterprise Linux. That's not necessarily the case anymore. CentOS Stream is more of a. It's not really rolling as much, but it's getting updates a heck of a lot faster than Red Hat is. It kind of sits
They
in between.
basically placed it between Fedora and Red Hat.
Yeah, in some ways, and then in other ways, it's before Fedora even on some things. So it kind of exists in a world more comparable to how OpenSUSE handles things.
Now there are new distros that do what CentOS used to do.
Yeah,
Rocky comes to mind.
Rocky and Alma, and there's others. Those are distributions that have continued down the path of simply doing a bug to bug clone of Red Hat, and that's a good option. But CentOS is still available, and if the RPM tools is your thing, then that is still a good way to go. For people that want to use tools like Cockpit, which is kind of a web uh, interface for managing your servers, it gives you like a whole lot of metrics on how your server is running. Cockpit is a Red Hat project, and that runs best on Red Hat or RPM based distros that use Network Manager as the networking interface. Um, so that's still a good option for something like that, and it's a perfectly fine option for like a website or something like that too. Okay, now these last two, um, or these next two, I should say, are the ones that I use on my SBC devices. Armbian. Armbian is a huge project, very ambitious. They provide an ISO or a bootable image for almost every single board computer device out there. And they have two, for most of them, they have two, well, they've got two concepts for each. One's like a Debian based and one's the Ubuntu base. And I've got Armbian running the server edition. Now they've got a desktop and a server for each one of these devices. I've got the Armbian server uh, running on my Rock Pro 64, and it's based on Ubuntu, the latest version of Ubuntu, and it is a fine choice because it gives you all the same. It actually gives you a forked version of the Raspberry Pi OS uh, uh, configuring tool, the Raspy config, and it gives you even more options. Like one thing you can do with the Armbian config tool is you can set a static IP address right there from that tool. That is, for whatever reason, they've not included that in the Raspy config tool, which is an interesting choice because setting a static IP address is one of the things you have to do if you're setting up a server, or it'd be maddening to run any kind of server without a static IP address. So that's one thing that Armbian, in my opinion, has over Raspberry Pi, and or Raspberry Pi OS, I should say. Um, and again, it's a fine option for all these little SBCs that are out there that are not commercially supported the way the Raspberry Pi is. Um, and Raspberry Pi OS is the next one on the list, incidentally, and it's what I've got running. I've got the light version running on, oh gosh, a Pi 4, Pi 400. The Pi 400 is running mintcast.org, and that is on Raspberry Pi OS Lite. So basically, it basically is Debian with a couple of, well, it's Debian compiled for ARM with some very specific stuff added in for the Raspberry Pi. Um, in fact, if you run NeoFetch on the 64-bit version of Raspberry Pi OS, it returns the Debian symbol as the ANSI logo. I don't know. I don't know why that hasn't been changed, or if that's not an important thing to them or whatever. But it is still probably the best choice for the Raspberry Pi because you're going to get all of the firmware updates a lot faster on Raspberry Pi OS. Uh, and I've never had a single problem with it. At the last, but certainly not least, is Ubuntu server. Now, if you want to set up a server and you want access to some very specific things, i.e., snaps, but most importantly, ZFS. If you're going to run any kind of file server and you want access to ZFS, there's also ZFS. I've heard that that's really similar in a lot of ways to ZFS.
It is ZFS, just Canadians and other people in the UK empire pronounce it as Z.
If I had to guess which one of you was going to bite on that, I would have guessed.
Well, my wife is Canadian. What can I say?
But yeah, you've got in-tree ZFS support on Ubuntu server. There's no messing around with DKMS or any of that. You've got it right there from install time. And if you need snaps for something, right now the only snap I use, and I don't anymore. I was using the CertBot snap to get my certifications, but then I learned how to make self-signed certs, so that's what I do now for these things. And so that really means I'm not running any snaps. But you have the access to if you wanted an easy way to set up a Nextcloud server, you've got that in a snap, and you're up and running with Nextcloud in minutes. But that's all I'll say about that. And you've got, apt install Docker, and then Docker just runs splendidly on Ubuntu. So of course, Docker would run well on anything. But I can say firsthand that it runs really well on Ubuntu server. And that is all I've got.
And I just noticed there were some popular distros that we skipped, such as Pop! OS, or the much more recent Tuxedo OS, which is also made to run on a machine that Tuxedo puts out, which is Clevo, I believe, still. Some of the System 76 machines are Clevos still.
And again, if the distro you love didn't make this list, please understand that that's just because these are the things that we use.
Write us a letter.
Yeah, write us. Tell us about
all
the stuff.
about it.
We don't have
Complain.
anything for vibrations this episode, so
No.
Complain, yell at us, tell us we suck.
And it's not fair
Q4OS.
too, because we've been putting out episodes on time too. So, you can't blame it on that anymore. So yeah, write in. Let us know what esoteric, strange distributions you're using, or what luck you've had with any of these.
What
And
works better
Yeah.
than any of the stuff we've mentioned?
Have you used LFS? Have you ever sat down and built something with LFS?
Is
If you did.
Hannah Montana Linux the best distro ever?
Rebecca Black OS.
Now, Rebecca Black OS. Now, that was an interesting one because it was kind of funny, but at the same time, I remember it being the very first distro to run exclusively on Wayland.
It is still being maintained, and it is considered a security OS.
Hey, there you go.
Well, that about wraps us up. We can probably blather on for hours, but
We're good at that.
this chair is getting kind of sore or something like that.
It's almost past my nap time.
Yeah. Us old folk, Well, we don't have anything for vibrations, so let's move on to check this out. Well, Londoner is not here to talk about this. Why don't you do it, Joe?
Well, Londoner provides the help with our time sync. So he provided Time Switch. It's an easy-to-use graphical program that allows you to power off, reboot, or suspend your system, send a notification, optionally with a sound signal, or execute any command on a timer. The app is built for GNOME and uses libadwaita, but it works in any desktop environment. The source code is available from GitHub. It is also available as a flat pack and is also in the AUR. Now, I thought this had to do with like time zones, but I guess not. So this is to graphically allows you to power on or off power off or reboot or suspend your system. That's interesting.
So it's probably like a graphical front end to something like shutdown TAC P, TAC H plus 1H or something like that.
Now we've all spent the last day or so fighting with Pysol FC, and we're trying out the new flat pack of my old favorite game.
Mine
It
too.
works, and I don't like it much. It doesn't include the card sets in the flat pack, and Bill likes the new icons. I don't.
I
Uh,
spent like 3 or 4 hours playing Mahjong.
I
Uh,
always use K Mahjong for that.
yeah, the Snap is the way to go on that. It's worth installing Snap G just to get Pysol FC.
I did use the flat pack for that.
Yeah.
So
For those who don't know what we're talking about, Pysol FC is an old solitaire game. It's actually all solitaire games that they could find. They have a nice set of card sets available. They have a lot of neat features, and it's just, I think, the coolest solitaire game out there.
Well, it is certainly the most feature rich. I mean, I don't know
yeah,
of anything. You might have stuff out there that looks more modern, but nothing has the sheer number of games and then
yeah. I mean,
the
it's a solitaire
configurability.
game on which I was playing Mahjong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's cool.
And we also have an article that we cut from news because it really wasn't news and it was really long. Unix is dead. It's a
Yeah.
great article, let's see, from the Register on the fact that all active development of Unix has ended, mainly because Linux and meets all the Unix criteria. But
Well,
they also mentioned in the article that even Windows could pass the Unix standards if they wanted to.
I don't know of anybody that's buying a machine and then putting Unix on it. So, I mean, if
No one
any,
is.
yeah, so if any development needs to be done at all, it's just to keep old esoteric stuff running that is sitting in a server farm somewhere in some company that's not changed a thing in 30 years, you know. That's not a criticism at all.
No, basically everything is migrated to Linux anyway.
Yeah.
Most of your stuff that worked on Unix works on Linux. So
There's no
Well,
why not move to
conceivable
something that's
reason to.
updated?
the article is both fun and informative, and y'all should read it. So that's it for Check This Out. Housekeeping. Thank you for listening to this episode of mintCast. If you see something you'd like to hear, if you see something that you'd like to hear about, tell us. Send us email at mintcast@mintcast.org. Join us live on YouTube, post to the Mintcast subreddit, chat with us on Telegram, Discord, Facebook, or post directly at https://mintcast.org. Our next episode is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Sunday, February 5th, 2023. And there's a link to get that converted to your time zone. Thank you, Londoner. Our next roundtable live stream is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, January 28th, 2023. And there's a link to convert that to your time zone. Our next roundtable live stream is 2 p.m. U.S. Central Time on Saturday, February 11th, 2023. And there's a link to get that converted to your time zone. Live stream information is available at mintcast.org/livestream. So, wrapping it up, where can we find you, Joe?
Well, I am on a couple of other podcasts. You can catch me on the Linux Link Tech Show, tllts.org. You can catch me on Linux Lugcast, linuxlugcast.com. You can send me an email directly, jb@mintcast.org, or you can buy me a coffee on Ko-fi. Moss?
I'm on Full Circle Weekly News and Distro Hoppers Digest. You can email me, bardmoss@pm.me. I'm at Zyvola at hosttux.social on Mastodon, and I've got websites at itsmoss.com and peacefulhippo.info. Bill?
Well, you can email me, bill@mintcast.org. I'm Bill_H on Discord. I'm at WC Hauser3 on Twitter and WC Hauser3 on Facebook. I've also got a Mastodon. I'm going to have to get that written in here. At WC Hauser3 at fosdon.org. And check out my other two podcasts, Three Fat Truckers, and Linux OTC. Linux OTC probably more for this crowd. The websites will be linked in the show notes. 3ftpodcast.org and linuxotc.org.
Before we leave, we want to make sure to acknowledge some of the people who make mintCast possible. Audio Freak Rio for our audio editing, also with help from Bill. I think we're still using archive.org for hosting our audio files.
Yeah.
Hobstar for our logo, InitRD for the animated Discord logo, Londoner for our time syncs, Bill for hosting the Linode, which runs our website maintenance, and the Nextcloud server on which we host our show notes and raw audio, and the Linux Mint development team for the fine distro we love to talk about. Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
Thanks, Clem.
And Co. It's a wrap.
'Tis a wrap.
223 and a half.